This Restorative Justice Life is a production of Amplify RJ. Follow us on all social media platforms at Amplify RJ, sign up for our email list, and check out our website at amplifyrj.com to stay up to date on everything we have going on. Make sure you're subscribed to this feed on whatever platform you're listening on right now so you don't miss an episode. And finally, we'd love it if you left us a rating and review. It really helps us literally amplify this work. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to This Restorative Justice Life, the podcast that explores how the philosophy, practices, and values of restorative justice apply to our everyday lives. I'm your host, David Ryan Barcega Castro Harris, all 5 names for the ancestors, and I'm the founder of Amplify RJ. On this podcast, I talk with RJ practitioners, circle keepers, and others doing this work about how this way of being has impacted their lives. Welcome, Jamie. Who are you?
I am the daughter of 2 Puerto Rican migrants.
Who are you?
I am a restorative justice practitioner.
Who are you?
I'm a mommy. I am a life partner, a daughter, a sister, and yeah, all those things.
Who are you?
I love using the word passionate to describe myself. So I'm going to say I am passionate. I am fire. I am loud.
Who are you?
I'm just out here trying to figure it all out, you know?
Yeah.
That's it.
Who are you?
I am forever on the journey. That's it.
Yeah. And finally, who are you?
I am Jamie Camille Caraballo Torres Millet.
Awesome.
Hey folks, I'm Elise, your producer, and today we are welcoming Jamie Millet as our guest today. Jamie has been an RJ practitioner for over 7 years within the Boston Public Schools and most recently in the higher education space as she created an RJ education and implementation organization called StayJust. Jamie strives to live restoratively as best she can every day as a mother of 2, a life partner, and a warrior against the anti-blackness and anti-oppression within her own body. This conversation hits topics about connection, looking beyond job titles, and community healing. But before we get into this episode, I would like to announce that signups for our summer intensives for educators are now open. Through 32 hours of live facilitation and asynchronous learning and year-long community support, this experience could help you experience the process of building authentic relationships and community as a means to learn how to cultivate a restorative community rooted in equity and trust at your school or place of work. It will help you foster deeper self-awareness to see the role you play in causing harm while upholding white supremacy culture and the areas that need unlearning, healing, and re-socializing. It will also help build skills that lean toward humanizing yourself and others, while restoratively addressing instances of harm and repairing your personal, professional, and communal relationships. More information can be found in the show notes below, as well as our Future Ancestor Collective, our YouTube, and so much more. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get right back into this episode.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Jamie. It's always good to check in to the fullest extent of the question, or as much as you want to answer. How are you?
It's so weird because I have gone through a lot of personal things this year so far. So it's like I'm surviving, but I'm also in a weird way like the best I've ever been, like spiritually. And the strongest I've ever been mentally. So it's like, it's like a weird space I'm in right now. It's just like, damn, this year has been really hard. And I can be sad sometimes and frustrated. Um, but I'm also in this weird way, like the most emotionally and mentally fit I think I've ever been.
Mm.
That's how I am.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't have to share what you don't want to, but what are the things that you've been able to do for yourself? Like, what are the practices that you've been able to tap into that have allowed you to be the fittest that you've ever been in the midst of everything that this year has brought?
First and foremost, for the first time in my life, I think I have opened myself up for connection. And that has come through a lot of therapy, and a lot of realization of lots of things that, I hope eventually we'll get into. One, some of it having to do with kind of like, dismantling the oppressor in me and the anti-blackness that has been handed down to me. So I think
Mm-hmm.
within realizing and coming to those realizations, um, I have been able to be way more honest, with myself. And I honestly just started like having like, um, conversations with myself and like out loud, like, like almost like meditative. Um, but like conversations with like honest conversations with myself, has definitely been like a big component to me staying, sane and like, even though it sounds kind of, crazy talking to yourself, but like I have like full blown conversations with myself sometimes, like checking myself and like, you know, but also opening myself up to connection is a big one, something that I have not always done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think my children primarily have helped a lot with that. Um, just allowing myself, to be open to connection with everyone, with all people.
Yeah. What does that tangibly look like? Like maybe like connection with your children and then maybe with others.
So like I would say with my children is like just first and foremost just like being more aware of those moments when they're not attention seeking, they're connection seeking, right?
Mm.
And instead of like, like come on, just go to the playroom or like whatever it is, it's like, all right, I'm gonna stay here with you, and I'm just going to listen, and I'm going to allow you to to speak to me, and I'm going to listen, like to truly listen. And I have found the correlation between, um, connection and truly listening, like really listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't, even with being in this work and in this field, like it wasn't until like a year ago where I realized that like I wasn't a good listener, you know? I, 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 I had this like, I don't know, like miswire,
Mm.
from my brain to my heart, and now I think with children and doing some therapeutic work with myself, I have realized like, just sit down and like listen to your child and just like hear them. And then sometimes like, I have equipped my children, and I can't even take all the credit. Like my oldest, Naima, will tell you, mommy, you know, this morning you were really hard on me, and she will say those words, and you kind of yelled at me a little bit when, I didn't go brush my teeth. And I'm just like, oh wow. And I'm like, okay, well, how did that make you feel when mommy yelled at you? She's like, it made me really sad and frustrated because you acted like a mean person, and I know you're not a mean person. And I'm
How old
like,
is
oh
this
my God,
child?
she's three. She's three. Oh my goodness. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, I affected you in this way, and I am sincerely sorry. Like, I apologize, baby. And that, in doing that with my children, it has changed me and how I listen and connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I kind of do the same thing, with my close friends, my family. Now I'm like, all right, let me listen. Like I'm gonna hear you, right? And I'm just gonna be your mirror, for a second.
Yeah.
And so that's been really powerful for me. I've definitely have transformed the way that I listen. and listen more, like actually listen more with my heart,
Hmm.
because I feel like I used to listen a lot, like to try to make logical sense of things, right? Or like to try to like, you know, I don't know. I don't even know how I used to listen, but now it's just like, all right, I'm going to like bring this in and really like give the person that is speaking like a spiritual piece of me real quick as I'm listening. And it has definitely transformed my relationships majorly.
Yeah. Was there like what was the catalyst for that change?
What really kind of like jolted me into like changing the way that I connect with folks was falling into, and I don't mind sharing these things, but I'm like falling into a bit of a depression early COVID,
Hmm.
and then like taking my therapy really serious, and then realizing the work that I needed to do. And so I became depressed over many things, the things that were happening in like in the world, specifically, with, police violence, and just many other social justice issues that were like just affecting me and my family. Um, and then I realized what I was contributing, as far as like, taking a good look at myself and my family and the anti-blackness that had been kind of like generationally passed down within my bloodline, stemming all the way back from, you know, colonizers, and coming through and like wiping out, um, the Taino peoples of the Caribbean who are my ancestors, right? So kind of like digging that deeply and then kind of like tracing it all the way back to even my parents, and how they parented me. And, they're both extremely like light skinned like myself. And, just kind of like going down memory lane in my own childhood and, teenage years, and realizing like blatant moments of like anti-blackness, in my childhood and, my upbringing. And then like realizing how those, I've internalized those. And now as an adult, even though I'm doing this work, I'm still perpetuating, like, the oppressor still lives in me. So that kind of is what jolted me into this, like, whew, no, I need to do something, right? I need to do some work. I got some unlearning to do, some breaking down to do, and that was hard. That didn't immediately like make me like, oh, I'm so woke now. It's like, no, it made me sadder.
Hmm.
Um, it made me sadder. And then slowly but surely, I started figuring out ways that I can put this unlearning into practice, by devoting myself to my family, and my partner, and having these conversations and doing uncomfortable stuff, like just like listening to my children and listening to them say, you were really mean to me today, and that was really crappy of you, and having to apologize. And because I'm married to a black man and I'm raising black children. So I felt like I really like, I need to do this work. And I feel like home is, you know, I always say like home is my place in the fight, unlearning, dismantling the oppressor within me and raising these children and being a partner to my husband is where my fight lies, is what I believe. So that's kind of where it all kind of started.
Yeah. What I appreciate about that so much is, we're coming up on the anniversary of the death of George Floyd, and we just
Hmm.
passed the anniversary of Breonna Taylor's murder, and of course, like, you know, we're still reeling from Dante
Hmm.
White, right? And
Hmm.
Dante Wright, I'm sorry, and all of the police violence that continues to happen, all the anti-black violence that continues to happen, not just from the police but from other people. Some people's
Hmm.
reaction to that is like, all right, what am I going to do systemically to change all these things?
Hmm.
What am I going to do in my workplace? And I think like all of those things are needed. But when you're talking on that systemic level, that policy level, um, policy is only as good as the people who are upholding those policies, right? And so like, I really appreciate highlighting the amount of internal work that it takes to really live into this work, what it really means to be to be about this life. You've been living this restorative justice life longer than you knew the word restorative justice, right? So in your
Hmm.
own words, how did that get started for you?
Ooh. Um, so first and foremost, I'm the oldest of seven, and although we didn't all grow up in the same household, I just naturally always had this like I cared about my relationships with my siblings like a lot.
Hmm.
And I always kind of like just like innately honored the differences in all of my relationships with my siblings, no matter where we all lived. You know, and I just always like was super mindful and I say this kind of like phrase to myself and to other folks when I'm explaining like how I kind of like do relationships, quote unquote. And it's just like I'm always mindful or conscious of the relationship even when the other person is not,
Hmm.
right? So I'm always pouring into the relationship even when the other person is not even aware that I'm doing that, and I've kind of always, operated that way in relationships. Like I am a very, very relationship centric person. Um, so when I finally got into like, the work piece, right?
Hmm.
Work. So I started off I'm from Boston, and I started working in the Boston public school system back when I was like 24. And I started off as a paraprofessional, right? A behavior support team paraprofessional, but really functioning as the dean of students of an elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And obviously, I know nothing about nothing, not nothing about running a school, being a dean, nothing. And I just always been this relationship centric person, so they thought I was good for the job, but they didn't want to pay me as a dean. Neither here nor there. I just
I mean,
started
I do think
noticing.
that's important, but we can come back to that.
Yeah, we can come back to that. And I just started noticing, what we were like suspending, kids for, and little kids. I'm talking about. I work in elementary school. I'm talking about first, second grade, third grade, getting suspended for pushing and shoving at recess, things like that. And then not only were we suspending them for like being kids, we were suspending black and brown kids more than we were suspending not black and brown kids, right?
Hmm.
Um, I noticed that, and then I'm like, whoa, I don't feel good about this. What's going on here? And then I like stumbled onto this BPS, Boston Public Schools, put on this like um, school to prison pipeline seminar or like workshop, right? And they sent me to that, and that's when I actually started getting the language of school to prison pipeline and what that is, right? And then they kind of like subtly said, the phrase restorative justice. It was like not really popping in Boston yet, but they kind of like threw that in there, like, oh, there's some ways to like remedy this. And then I'm like, wait, what's that? Like that, I don't know, what is that? So I started digging around myself and then started teaching myself. And then a lot of like my work with RJ actually is like self-taught, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
Just a lot of reading, a lot of research, and a lot of practicing. Um, so I brought circles to the school. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm just sitting in a room with a whole bunch of all of my siblings, and like we're just like talking about, just talking about stuff, right? I felt like when I was breaking up fights between my siblings, like, hey, what happened here? Okay, you know what I mean? Like, what happened? Like, how did that make you feel? And I just started doing more of that with the kids when they were in trouble or getting kicked out of class. Like, all right, what happened, man? Like, oh yeah, she said that the teacher said this to you. Okay, how did that make you feel? All right, well, did you communicate it that way with the teacher? All right, well, let's try to communicate that way with the teacher. So I started off like that, and then before you know it, we were getting folks to come, do trainings and all that jazz, and then brought it to the school climate team. Long story short, um, shortly after that, I actually got hired as a school climate and restorative justice practice coordinator. at a high school in Boston. Same thing, doing climate work, behavior support work, trying to, bring the RJ practices into the high school. Um, and then I stumbled upon Suffolk University. They have the Center for Restorative Justice, and I got, I think, a few formal trainings there. Um, but a lot of this work, honestly, like I said, has been self-taught. And I also have to mention, actually, when I was working in BPS, I was actually at Salem State getting my master's for social work.
Hmm.
And it was really there where I actually like truly immersed myself in like whatever research was out there on the school to prison pipeline, on restorative justice as a form of like, a remedy, relationship, therapy. Like I really enthralled myself into like RJ, like the more, kind of like sciencey, like science of it, and how it actually affects um, the human body to really engage in meaningful dialogue, especially around you know especially when there are what is the word that I'm looking for, when there's conflict.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so from there, I went back to my alma mater, Pine Manor College, in Chestnut Hill, Mass, and I accepted the role of, what was my role? Director of Community Standards and Restorative Practices. So that's kind of been my like timeline journey. And like I said, it's kind of crazy, because a lot of the RJ work is innate for me, right? It's like it's been in me for a long time before I knew I had the words. And I love when people ask me like, so what's your RJ resume? Or like, what's your like background in RJ? Or like, so where you been trained? I'm like, I got like one or two trainings in like Suffolk, but like a lot of this has been like, self-taught or just in me, or self-taught or like just bringing it out of me to actually, you know, just be in relationship with people. So,
Yeah, that's so funny. Like right in this moment right now, I'm reflecting on my training being in circle where you just listen to people talk,
yeah,
but you like blew through like your entire story, and there's so much that I want to pick out in
I
each
know.
one of those pieces. So I'm gonna bring us all the way back. um,
I do. So sometimes I feel like I be talking too much. So I'm like, all right, I'm just cut this short. But you let me know where you want me
No,
to
no,
go
no, no,
back.
no. It was all good. Like, and I might like break the circle keeper in me and like interrupt you a little bit,
It's
but
okay. Let me
but
know.
I wanted to go back just like all the way to the first thing that you were saying. Like, as an older sibling, right? You felt like there was something in you, but to want to be that peacemaker, that relationship driven person, but. That generally happens because there's a model for you to follow. Who was that for you?
You know what? To be honest with you, I, I think, hmm, I think I was operating from a lack thereof,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
So I think I was operating because I didn't have that role model, and there was so much chaos in my childhood that I sought out peace. I wrote a lot as a kid, and as a sibling, especially. I feel like older sisters, definitely. I don't know. We just get really like overprotective of our like younger siblings. And I always try to protect them from the chaos, right? And I think it's because I felt like I didn't have that protection myself.
mm-hmm.
And in protecting them, I felt protected, right? So I protected them not only, not just like not like in the physical sense, but like in the emotional and like mental sense. So that's why I cared about my relationship. Now, I wasn't the perfect, older sister all the way, but um, in those ways, I tried, you know, to just somehow shield them from the chaos.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too, right? It's not always that there's a model, but it's just like what is the thing that we need to adapt to
Hmm.
um get that peace, that wholeness. And, I think, 7 core assumptions of restorative justice: human beings want to be in good relationship. Maybe not like a model from your life, but like, what was it inside of you that says like, I want to create this peace in my home, in my community, for these people? We can just
Um,
attribute it to like big sister instincts, but I'm curious if there was something like more direct that you could
no,
pass
I
on.
really do think I mean, it's a mixture of big sister instincts and, it says my internet's unstable, sorry. Um, and the fact that I yearned for it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
yearned for like older sibling or like a protector of some sort. And I felt a lot of times that I didn't have that in my childhood, so I kind of like leaned into the need in the way of like by way of doing that for my younger siblings. And then that transferred into the reason why I got into education to begin with, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always said to myself, oh yeah, I want to work with young people, right? Because I want to be, a mentor, a role model, the role model I never had or the mentor I never had. Or that was always my rhetoric a lot when I was younger and I was entering the world of youth development or youth work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was always like summer camp leaders. I worked in youth centers, all because that big sister instinct, but then also like I've always felt like I yearned for that adult adult relationship, a positive adult relationship. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think about like the roles that you got put into, right? Just like the titles of them, right? Behavior support specialist, but it's really like control these people's behavior. And then it's like culture climate coordinator, like what are we doing with the kids? And then I don't remember exact wording. Oh, like student conduct, right?
Yeah.
Those are like the job titles that you've been given, and we both know that restorative justice and this way of being is so much more than just like behavior management. um when you were stepping into those roles, how how did that sit with you? Because like,
It
right,
was,
you're trying to be like relationship driven, but like your job description is often like, here are the bad kids, or here are the kids that are having problems.
yep. Um, part of part of me felt like, you know what? Well, I trust myself, right? I know
Mhm.
how I'm going to approach this position, right? I know how I'm going to approach this job. So it's like I'm thankful that it's me in this position and it's not anyone else because I know that I'm going to approach this way. However, even with those great intentions, the system, specifically the school system and even the community, the school community itself, we often talk about restorative justice being co-opted, right?
Mhm.
So I've yet been in an educational setting that has not co-opted the practices, right? Or restorative justice practices, because like we said earlier, like to me, right? If you do not embark on the spiritual and like personal journey, like to like dismantle and unlearn the things that you need to unlearn, then you are automatically like co-opting these practices, right? If you are an institution, right? And you say, oh, I want to hire a restorative justice coordinator, right? But you as a community or, yeah, as a community are not like willing, right? Not even prepared, because there's no real way I think to be prepared for this stuff, but like willing to do the personal work that it takes, like to really be a restorative community or to live restoratively. I feel like you're co-opting the work. So that's what I ran into, like in all of those positions. So I mean, as you can see, like I ended up out of those positions, like eventually, right? And a lot of it was because I began feeling like, oh no, like there's nothing that Jamie can do, um, to get through, to a whole system right now, right? Because it's not just about the school community. So what I did in those positions is just focus wholeheartedly on my relationships with people, students and teachers and staff that wanted to listen and truly wanted to engage. Um, and I did that to the best of my ability, but it was extremely difficult. And I'm not going to say that there weren't any successes, but again, we're dealing with a school system that is co-opting the practices. They don't want someone to come in and truly do like, truly push people to or challenge people to engage with their inner selves so they could be better people for the students and, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, I yeah, they were in a place in their, I think, in their journeys to be accepting of that. They just, and when I say they, I mean like the system. And I think they're still not well, they're getting there, but they weren't at a place in their journey that they were willing to accept what it truly, or take on what it truly means, or truly takes to be a restorative community.
Yeah, I think about one, um, shameless plug for the summer restorative justice intensive that we're doing for educators, where we are focusing on, right, what does it take to dismantle white supremacy culture within yourself, right, and build those proactive practices within yourself, right? The first relationship you have is the relationship with yourself, right? And so if you are internalizing characteristics of white supremacy culture, if you're not in good relationship with yourself, if you're not caring for yourself, how are you supposed to do that for others? How are you supposed to do that for others, period, in your own life? But like, furthermore, how are you supposed to go into a system that dehumanizes folks and act in a just way, like act in a humanizing way? And so if you're wanting to go deeper with that, Amplify RJ is a great place to do that. But, you talked about like there were some ways in which that was successful, mostly based off of your relationships. What were the things that you were doing like in both your roles as, maybe like think about your role as a behavior support specialist, culture climate coordinator, and then student conduct coordinator.
Yep.
Like what were some of the things that you did that were successful in each of those spaces?
Um, I just remember like the trend amongst all of them was those moments where I actually just like was not an administrator, was not the coordinator, blah 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 blah, whatever. Like I was just Miss Jamie, right? And I was listening, right? Because I often found that they just wanted to be the students specifically. Actually, no, because the teachers, as teachers, staff, students alike, everyone just wanted to be heard and
Mm-hmm.
listened to, right? And I never came in with like, all right, I'm the new RJ person. We're gonna do RJ. Like, I'm just gonna force this down everybody's throat. I just like the successes came when I just like sat folks down either individually or as a group and listened and like recorded like what they like were saying. All right, what are your major concerns, right? What is your experience, in this community? Do you feel like you can freely practice your values in this community?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel valued in this community, right?
Yeah.
And let's talk about that, right? What would make you feel valued? Are there specific people that you want to value you or want to show that they value you? And then from there, you would just see like people's whole vibe and expression just start changing, right? And that's even without calling it RJ, calling it a circle. Like, let's just come together and just like, let's just talk, What do we need from our community, right? And what is it that we have to offer our community? And how can we make that work to make this community a functional one, a healthy one, one that's good for all people? And when I did that, that's when I actually made the most like stride or breakthrough with folks um, in all positions. Because I once I did that the first time and I saw like the power of asking those questions and like truly just like inviting people to, you know, to not only share but to be heard and
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like, because it's not often that folks are asked or like, do you feel valued here? Or
Yeah.
what are you, and what's important to you? Or like, what are your values? And what do
Mm-hmm.
you offer the community?
Yeah.
Right? Um, So when I did that, you know, and even with with students, like the young people, most of them just wanted to be heard and respected, because a lot of, you know, obviously in traditional education, we have this kind of like deposit system, like adult teacher kind of like, you know, not like very like you know, linear way of teaching. And sometimes, you know, kids would like young people would just, you know, just say, Jamie, you know, honestly, I just don't, they know I don't learn like that. So when this way of teaching is being forced upon me, I'm going to rebel because I'm a teenager and I'm a human being. I'm standing up for myself and I'm not with it. I don't learn like that. So if you're
Hmm.
not willing to adjust yourself, then I'm not going to adjust myself. I remember vividly that conversation with a student, you know, and she was what, she was 16. And I'm like, I had not even half the courage that you have to speak up and say those things, right? But no one was hearing her. You know, they just saw her as a problem, constantly
Hmm.
being put out of classes and not understanding that we need to adjust, right? We need to let go of this control um, over our young people and let them start making, you know, being more autonomous, you know. So
People often ask where to start when it comes to quote unquote implementing restorative justice, right? And that conversation around values is so important, right? Like,
hmm
what are the ways that we want to be together? What are the ways that we're saying we want to be together? And then, like, what are the things that we're actually doing, right?
hmm
And what, you know, as you're saying, like, when people are heard in those things, um, it goes like so much smoother. It goes so much better. It is healing for folks to be able to really just be who they are and accepted for who they are. I think one of the journeys that I'm going on right now is this departure from even using like the words diversity and inclusion, right? Because diverse from whiteness included into a system of whiteness and white supremacy culture and dominance and oppression and patriarchy and all those things,
yeah,
right? So like we don't want those things. We want to build a space where people are welcome, feel like a sense of belonging for who they are, and celebrated for that, right?
hmm
And we don't get to have those conversations until we're actually, like, sorry, we don't get to know those things that will make people feel celebrated, and accepted until you have those conversations, right? Like
absolutely.
how, like simply, like how do you feel appreciated, right? How would you like to learn? Like, what are the things within the context of our working relationship or our student teacher relationship that will make you feel valued, right? And like very tangibly asking those questions, right? I'm thinking
hmm
about like the beginning of a summer camp ish program that I was running once, and you know, first day is like chart paper on a bunch of different pieces of the room where we're all going around like, hey, these are things that I need as a facilitator of this learning from you. What are the things that you need from me? What are the things that you need from each other? Let's talk about
hmm
it, right? How are
hmm
we going to navigate conflict when that happens? And then
hmm
when we have those agreements, we're able to navigate forward in a lot easier way. And I know that's easier to do with 20 students that I am with, you know, 5 days a week for 4 hours a day, for, you know, weeks on end. But having those conversations with people in your family, right? People who you work with, people who you are working for, right?
hmm
And students, like, prevent so much of this can prevent so much of this tension, and it proactively sets you up to be in good relationship, right? um
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I was just I'm in full agreement. And you know, to add to that, I just feel like, again, it's not often that we're asked to kind of reflect on our values, right? And the things that are important to us and what we have to offer and things like that. And when we're giving those opportunities, that is just like it plants. I have seen that it plants the seeds for healing.
Hmm.
And And I use that word because it's, I've lived that the past, like, 1 or 2 years, where actually really doing the work of figuring out what it is that is important to me as a human being, um, and how and what that means for my world, and the communities that I pour into, and the people, the relationships that I pour into. And you said something earlier that um I also wanted to touch on, was that when we feel valued, right? We are empowered now to, like, to do and be our full
Hmm.
selves, and to, like, pour into others, right? And that reminded me of a conversation that I recently had with my partner about, you know pouring into each other's love tanks, right? And I see
Hmm.
my relationships, like my relationship, like that. And that's why I said about being conscious of being aware of relationships, even when I'm not required to in that moment, or even when the other person, my community doesn't, is not asking anything of me in that moment. And I find that in operating that way, right? I find that my love tank stays full, because I'm constantly pouring into my communities, constantly pouring into my relationships, my relationship with my partner, and that empowers them, right, to then pour back into me. And that's what I feel love the most, or appreciate the most about living restoratively, is that, once you make a practice, make a habit of this, you are just going to just, like, exude, or you're just going to, unconsciously be pouring into your relationships, just off the strength of, that's my practice, that's my habit now, you know, and just continuously, create this cycle of empowerment for one another, where you're all as a community just pouring into each other. You feel connected to each other, right? Talk about interrelatedness and interconnectedness. You feel a sense of responsibility that doesn't feel burdensome, right? Because it's love, it's values, it's honor. Um,
I mean, and I think, like, those feelings don't make things easy, right?
mm-mm.
We don't want to, like, paint the picture that, like, once you have these conversations and you feel this way, like, everything's gonna be perfect, right? What are the ways that you've navigated the hard parts of that?
Oh, I mean, and I think in the same realm, like that picture I just painted, like it's also very uncomfortable, right? To have to, you know, not worry so much about how someone else is treating you, or like the things that are hurting you or harming you, but more focused on the responsibility you have to your community or to those relationships. And that has been very, very difficult. And that comes with a lot of, um, that has come from me specifically, with a lot of work. And a lot of being okay with being, like, uncomfortable, um, especially when, you know, trying to unlearn and dismantle, um, you know, white body supremacy, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
for example, right? Shout out to Resma. Um,
Menakem, for
yes,
those who don't know, yes.
yes. I said it like I know him like that, but thank you.
He
Um,
DM'd me back on Instagram
I
once.
know we know each other. No, but it just, like, no, I feel like that's like the utopia, right? Like I said
Mhm.
before, like, right, these kind of like people, like communities of people that are just, like, pouring into each other and pouring into these relationships. But that comes with a lot of work, a lot of, um, I'm trying to, like, find the words to, like, describe that work, because it's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's practice, like it's like a practice, or like a series, like it's just like an ever, like, never ending, like, just like work of, you know um understanding how to, how each other's values, and each other's, I don't know, like, how to be in community, with each other. That's not a one conversation thing, or one dialogue, one moment thing. That's like a million of little moments together that like I feel like create those pictures or those relationships. So um yeah,
Yeah,
a
I mean, the
lot.
question with this work is always inevitably, what do you do with the people who aren't trying to be in a relationship with you that kind of way?
Education for me has been where I found more of those like, folks who aren't um just really at the place of wanting to engage in RJ work. Um And what I have done specifically in those situations is, first of all, I never go into any community kind of like trying to force any practices or anything down anyone's like, throat. I've I've always just, especially the folks who have like kind of like shied away or not shown interest in engaging in the work, I've always just found a way to make a connection in some way, shape, or form, right? And
Hmm.
not necessarily mean like, oh, I'm calling anything like RJ, or I just invited like folks like in some capacity, and I try to connect with them in some way, shape, or form. Right, so they can see Jamie, the person, the human, and not so much as, oh, Jamie has come in now as a director of restorative justice and, community standards. But just, I've always found a way to just somehow connect with people. And if folks just weren't in the space at the given time to like connect, then, I mean, allowing, allowing that to be okay as well. Never, I'm trying to think in like more recently in my last role, like I've never like excluded anyone from any opportunity to engage
Hmm.
in community work, but I also never forced anything. I've allowed people to come, and engage if they wanted to, as they wanted to, but then also just extended the invitation to everyone. um and that's how I kind of like managed those relationships, and eventually sometimes they turned into, I feel like more oftentimes than not, I got folks to want to engage somehow because they saw that it wasn't like, you know, like superficial work, or they saw the value in being valued, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Like they saw the value in being valued, and they saw the value in valuing um, others as well. And I think once folks got the right impression or the right understanding of what, the work was, I think they were more, not I think, I saw that they were more open to connecting.
Yeah. And I think, for people who are newer to this work or who are in a place where this work is so desperately needed, and the students, both the students and um, staff people who are working under systems of oppression need this work to need the environment to change now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like humans don't generally, I'm not saying they never, but humans don't generally change behavior like that, change thought processes like that overnight. And so like this process of building relationships and invitations into those thought processes, and these new quote unquote new ways of being, right, these are as old as humans have ever been
Right.
together, right? But like that's something that I still have a hard time navigating, right? Because I know you can't like force someone into being restorative, but it's so needed. And like oftentimes people don't value it unless there's like, oh, there's this crisis or there's this thing happening, and like bring in Jamie to like make the relationships better, or bring in
Right.
whatever restorative person to make it better, but not wanting to proactively do the work.
Mm-hmm. And I would always say like my favorite place to live, right? If we look at the pyramid, right, is that tier one, that kind of like the building of
Mm-hmm.
relationships, the creation of relationships, and figuring out the values and all that. And I
Yeah.
found when people initially, were resistant, um, once like they realized that, and I'm gonna be honest, right? It's like if a lot of teachers or professors like they thought it was just like this like lack of accountability and this kumbaya like situation, and it was all about straying away from punishment or accountability and all that jazz. And when they realized that it was way more than that, and even I feel like the restorative process and accountability through the restorative process, I think it's way more like it's deep accountability as opposed to receiving a punishment and getting sent home for a few days. That's not accountability to me. But I think once they saw that they just kept getting invited to these opportunities to engage with their community and be be valued or be heard, I think their perspective started changing a little bit. What are you gonna say?
Well, so what you were saying, like, that's not accountability to me. I think Fania Davis put it really well in an article she wrote for Truth Out in response. Oh, you're nodding. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
A lot. When Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all three counts, the thing that I saw most on Instagram, Twitter was like, "This is not justice. This is accountability." And I'm like, "No, this is punishment. This is
Mm-hmm.
like the state calling murder murder and punishing someone, right? Like, there's nothing that
Right.
he needed to do to
Mm-hmm.
proactive, like to change his behavior. He just sat there, and he's gonna sit in jail for
Mm-hmm.
sit in prison for probably like 3 to 6 years. Let's be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and walk back out probably unchanged with more like without projecting, right? Like with more ignorance, hate, or just contempt or apathy towards
Mm-hmm.
what's happened, right? That's not accountability. I
Right.
hope that he finds some kind of need to change, want to change, and I hope that he's supported in all the ways that he's needed, right? We talk about restorative justice both being about meeting the needs of the people who cause harm and who have been harmed, right?
Ooh.
The state doesn't need to be involved in any of that. But that's the world that we live in. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is a whole other conversation for
I know,
another
because I
time.
want to
Like,
like.
you're like because like I know like nap time is almost over, and I want to get to the questions that
No, you go ahead.
the questions that I ask everyone. But yeah, go ahead. Respond real quick,
Ah,
or
so
not if it's not enough
well,
time.
I will say, and I say this a lot, right? Especially in working in these like behavior support or discipline community standard roles, is that when if I don't use the restorative, if I use the punitive route, the institution, am taking the place of the harmed party. And that is not my right. That's not right. Because I'm saying you broke a rule, all right, in this community. So you're suspended. You're in trouble now. What did you do? Who did it? How are we going to punish them, right? In my opinion, I'm taking the role of the harmed party. And that's not right. I don't have the right, to do that, and I feel like in that case, it's kind of like the same thing. I see like school, discipline and like that situation just like similar in the sense of like, how is that help? I mean, I understand like, okay, there's something that has been done, I guess, but like, does that heal the family?
Mhm.
What does that do for the harmed parties? Does that magically bring someone back from the dead? Like, what does this does nothing to to heal, right? To heal the pain of this person being taken and being gone. And I feel like now, like the state takes the role of the harmed party because of it's just like you said, they're calling murder murder, and now we're gonna who did it? We're punishing this person, and that's just how we do things. But where's the space, right, for the family and for folks, everyone that has been harmed and hurt by this to really like what do they get? That's how I feel. Like what what healing does this bring them? What that's why I don't like that's where my head always lives. It's just like, what does this really do? Does it bring him back from the dead and bring him back to his family and his daughter? It doesn't. Yeah. So that's why I don't talk about it often, because I'm just like, what does this do? What does this
Right.
do? It's
Well,
not. It's
and I think the question that we would get in response is one, like, there are a lot of people who still like find value in punishment and carceral logic, and so when someone does something that's harmful, they want that person to be punished, and they want that public acknowledgement that like this thing happened. And so
Yeah.
like i'm not I'm not judging that. I think the
Mhm.
question that often comes to people like us is then like, okay, so what do you want to do with someone like Derek Chauvin? And I
Mm.
think the possibilities are endless for that, right? There are
Mhm.
lots of different models of, it doesn't have to be reconciliation with George Floyd's family, right? If they don't want
Right.
that, that doesn't have to be a part
That
of the
doesn't have to
process.
be that.
Um, but it looks like maybe it does look like being removed from community for a while. But what does it look like to do that in something that's rooted in love, and saying like,
Mhm.
hey, like, you took the life of another person. How are you feeling? Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awful. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, like, this can't happen within the context of the criminal legal system, because like there's no space for him to say like, I did this, I'm guilty of this, and this is how I feel. Like, the criminal legal system says deny, 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 and
Mhm.
blame it
Mhm.
on this person's heart condition or
Mhm.
opioid
Mhm.
addiction, right?
Yep.
um, this man is going through a human experience too. He's going through loss. Like, what are the ways that he can be supported, and how do we meet his needs, right? Part of those needs are for like anti-racism training and unlearning white supremacy, right? But it looks like a lot of it can look like a lot of different things.
No, I was just gonna say something quick about how I wonder who else in the world feels like me, in the sense of like, I am a person that I value and respect and honor the dignity of all parties involved in anything, right? And I have like I have a lot of sad feelings for Derek, right? That's his name,
Mm-hmm.
Derek Chauvin. For the things that you just said, it's just like there's never space in the way that we do things, right? In the punitive system, to like ask what you just said, like, you took someone's life. How do you feel right now, right? What does this verdict say to you, right? As a white man, is that even present for you? Like, what were you surprised by the verdict, right? Why? Or just anything. Just like ask them, like treat them like a human being as well. And I feel like when this system just makes these decisions and they lock people up without regarding the humanity in those people, like I feel like we lose them. Like we that's a soul lost to me in a lot of ways. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no rehabilitation there. There's nothing rooted in love. There's nothing. It's just, I'm gonna lock you up, and then when you serve your time, you come back out, and then I expect you to be a decent human being when you come back out. It's like, hmm, that doesn't it doesn't
Yeah.
sit right. Like it just doesn't. It's not. I mean, and I know this has been going on forever, but it's just like that's what breaks my heart the most you know um about anything, right? I don't think he's gonna come out a better. I mean, I hope, but the way that our system works, I don't think that he's gonna just come out a better human being. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes me even more sad.
A lot of people come to restorative justice with this idea of just being alternatives to punishment. How do you define restorative justice?
So, I know that I love this question because you ask any RJ practitioner, they're all going to give you different answers. And mine is kind of like a combination of like some of my favorite practitioners, and but also me. I love what Eric Butler said once in a conversation, that restorative justice is like the freedom to practice your own values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that really stuck with me because it's just like, wow, like, yes, like restorative justice is to be in the community where you can like freely practice who you are, and be you and be valued and be honored. Um, to me, restorative justice is also the recognition that all things are interconnected and interrelated. Um, and the sense of responsibility, things that what I went on a rant about earlier, just like that responsibility for, the next person in my community, and the unconscious, just pouring into, my relationship with others, um, and love. I think justice is love. It's yeah, it's as
Yeah.
cliche and funny as that sounds, just love.
Yeah. Um, you get to sit in circle with four people, living or dead. Who are they? And what do you talk?
Woo!
Oh, what's the question that you asked the circle?
This is my favorite question to ask, and it's not going to be like the most deepest, most profound, but I really get the deepest, profound answers sometimes. Is so the first person is Alicia Keys, okay,
Okay.
for many reasons, but primarily because yeah, I fell madly in love with her work when I was 11 years old, and she's still a big part of my world right now. In many different ways, I feel like she's my spirit sister. Um, the other person, geez Louise, I feel like I have a million and I can't even pick four. Um, oh my God, David. Kobe Bryant. I'm gonna say Kobe Bryant. Um, there's just so many admirable things about him as a human being and his brain. Um, and
I just
shoot,
gotta throw in there. Allegations acknowledged.
she's acknowledged. Okay. Um, two more. Miles Davis. Um, and last one. Maya Angelou.
And what is the question you ask the circle?
I would ask them my favorite question to ask folks. Um, what is the song on your heart right now? What is the song? What song is on your heart right now? And what does that tell you about where you are?
Mm. What song is on your heart right now?
The song that is on my heart right now is Nobody Not Really by Alicia Keys. And if you guys don't know that song, you should go and hear it. It's on Songs in A minor. No, I'm sorry, it's on Diary of Alicia Keys. And I love that song. That's the song in my heart.
Mm. Um, can't play that because of copyright. But go listen on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your music.
Nobody Not Really.
What's one thing, a mantra or affirmation that you want everyone listening to hear?
Be mindful even when your mind is full.
Hmm. Just gonna sit with that for a second.
Be mindful even when your mind is full.
Yeah. Um, two more questions. And this one you have to help me out with. Who's one person that I should have on this podcast? You got to help me get them on.
Um, have you had Eric Butler on here?
I've reached out.
Okay.
We're trying to schedule it. Yeah.
Okay, 'cause yeah, he doesn't know me at all, but he's one of my favorite people
Yeah. Yeah.
ever. But yeah, Eric, do you know, so you know Suffolk, right? Do you have a relationship with Suffolk? The
No, not really.
the Center of Restorative Justice. I think an interesting person to have would be Susan Mays Rothstein, I think her name is, and I think she is one of the head folks over at the Center of Restorative Justice at Suffolk. I think it would be interesting to have her.
Looking forward to that introductory email. Hey. And finally, how and where can people support your work in the ways that you wanted to be supported? We didn't even really talk about StayJust at all. What are you
No,
up
it's
to
okay.
now?
Back in December, January-ish, I started my own restorative justice education and implementation org called StayJust. And it's it's all me right now. And you can find me on Instagram at StayJustRJ, and then you can also check out my website, www.stayjust.com. There you can find more information about me, my story, my background, and also the work that I do. Um, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm up to right now, aside from mommying and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I know nap time is almost over, but like, what are the highlights of the things that you do and the ways that you work with people?
Yes, so I do workshops, I do trainings, and yeah, those are the most of the biggest things that I have to offer are workshops and trainings. And I work primarily in the educational setting, primarily higher ed, but I'm also open to connecting with K to 12 um, folks as well. But yeah,
So
that's me.
check out Jamie and StayJust. Link to all of those things will be in the show notes. We're really well, me right now, but everybody who's listening, I know, gained a lot from this. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time on such short notice. I asked you to do this yesterday because we had to reschedule one of our other guests, but really just so much gratitude for your
Yeah,
time
no
and your
problem.
sharing today. Well, that is that for this episode of This Restorative Justice Life. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, take care. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Elise here. I really resonated with one of the things that she said towards the beginning, where she said that her children are not attention seeking, but are instead connection seeking. This simple reframing takes a phrase that has a very negative connotation, attention seeking, and changes it into an opportunity to connect. Where can you find opportunities to connect in difficult situations? Also, I really liked the conversation about job titles. We often define ourselves by labels and titles because that's often how our world works. How do you work beyond your labels? What contributions do you make to your community that can't be defined by a short job description? One thing that I find isn't always asked, but I want to ask you as a listener, what are your needs when you feel that you are taking on more responsibility than your job description or job title? As you think about those needs, I encourage you to act upon one of them as a form of self-care today. Thank you for listening to this episode with me today, and if you would like to stay connected with Amplify RJ, please check out our show notes below where we have all of our social media handles, and you can check out our future Ancestor Collective community gathering spaces and all of our workshopping courses. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Like what you heard? Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast on whatever platform you're using right now. It really helps us further amplify this work. You can also support us by following us on our social platforms, signing up for our email list, rocking our new merch, joining our Patreon, or signing up for a workshop. So many options! Links to everything in the show notes and on our website, amplifyrj.com. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.